Hello and welcome to this conversation brought to you by White House Custom Color. I'm Jed Toffer, and today I have a very special guest sitting with me. Julieanne Kost from Adobe is here to have a little chat. Hello, Julieanne.
Hello, Jed. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Like thousands of other people, I have followed you many years before we were actually introduced, I think, by David Junian at one point in a tremendously awkward Dave Junian style. But what struck me is I wanted to know initially, before we really jump into this, what's it like for you to be photo famous?
What? Photo famous? I don't know. I don't see myself like that.
You don't? You really don't? I wondered
No.
if you didn't.
No, not at all.
Meaning a lot of people know who you are.
Well, hopefully. I mean, that's my goal is all about education. So it's not necessarily that they know who I am, but I'm pretty fascinated with technology. I'm not really great at technology, to be honest. I know you're giving me that look, but the thing is I have access to people who build these tools. So I have this incredible advantage where I see the software as it's being built, and it gives me time to learn it. And then it gives me time to kind of figure out how to wrap my head around it, and then how I can explain it to other people so that they can use it. So for me, what I enjoy most about my job is the fact that I can help other people understand things and do their own work.
So you consider that your biggest strength?
Yeah.
Basically putting things in layman's terms and conveying it to people that need to actually use it.
Well, and helping people who lead very busy lives and are trying to run businesses and everything, and maybe the photo editing is just a very small portion of their life. How do they keep up? How do they learn all of these things? The industry is constantly evolving, and it's kind of nice to be able to be that person and say, hey, did you know about this? Or, hey, this might help you. Considering
all the other stuff that we automatically have to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense. Today, though, we're going to talk about, I like this topic, the role of personal photography projects for professionals.
Yeah.
Why did you choose that over something else?
Well, for one, I just wrote a book on it.
Perfect.
So that's the dead giveaway. But the reason that I wrote the book is because I do talk to a lot of photographers, and there seems to be this point in a lot of, especially professional photographers' life, where, I don't know, they just kind of burn out. Right? Like they fell in love with photography for whatever reason, whatever they loved to photograph, whatever they loved about the process, but then, eventually it turned into work. And this doesn't happen to all photographers, right? Some people never need to do a personal project because every day for them is an expression of their creativity and personal work. But I think I can relate to a lot of people who do run into this. Gosh, I don't even remember why I started photography.
You can relate to that.
I can relate to it.
What was it like for you?
Well, just in college, I was taking classes in photography, and I really realized early on that I didn't really want to do what other people wanted me to do. Like, I didn't want to, there was a lot of photography that I didn't want to do. I didn't necessarily like photographing people. I didn't like, just printing in the darkroom. I didn't want to own my own studio. I really wanted to make fine artwork, and I loved doing composites, and that's what I really wanted to pursue. But I also wanted to earn a living, and I don't feel that I'm that good of a salesperson, so I wasn't going to take that on and become a fine artist and promote myself. And I just didn't think that was what I wanted to do. So I figured, well, when I was taking classes, this job came up at Adobe in technical support, and I thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to get my foot in the door of this major corporation where they will teach me to learn the tools that I need to pursue my craft, and I can learn on the job, and I have access to all these really, really smart people. And then I get to go out in the industry and give talks to people and meet all these photographers who I look up to, and I can somehow help them, and maybe some of their talent will rub off on me.
So did you kind of just fall into that then? Is that?
Yeah, I'm so fortunate. I mean, I was going to school at I went to school for psychology, and then I got out of psychology, and I decided I didn't really want to be a therapist. But that is, I will say, I use those skills every day when I talk to people, and it teaches you empathy, and it teaches you, like, people don't always know the right words when they're asking
Yeah.
questions and
Right.
stuff. So, but I was going back to school for photography, and it just so happened I was at junior college, and one of my instructors was writing the duotone curves for Adobe
Oh my.
for like version 2.
Wow.
And he said, hey, there's a spot open at Adobe, and they were in my backyard. And I went to school with the kids that were our founders, and they're lovely people. And
So do you consider yourself more one over the other regarding fine art photographer as opposed to educator?
I would say my official job and my role at Adobe is going to be more through education and providing people with the resources that they need in order to learn the technology so that they can do what they want to do. In my personal life, I'm not even sure I would call it fine art. I took a class with a gentleman named Keith Carter, and he uses the term a lens-based artist. And I thought that was just fantastic.
A lens-based
artist, because there's always the few folks who just have a hard time saying, well, you know, what I do is not photography when I'm compositing multiple images together. That's some kind of art. And I just don't want to have that discussion anymore. For me, it's all about creative expression, and the tools I use are a little bit irrelevant to the final creation. So lens-based artist, I thought. And if you don't know, Keith Carter is a fantastic artist.
I don't know him.
His work is fabulous. So if you ever get a chance, look him up.
I'll do that. Keith Carter. Why do photographers need personal projects?
I think sometimes, and this is really not true for all photographers, but I'm not sure that all photographers, when they are doing the work that they do to earn the money to support their family, I'm not sure if they feel that it's their most meaningful work. I think they think that there are other things that they could be photographing, things they want to express, things they want to explore, avenues they want to go down, and it's not what they do on a daily basis. So to have these other projects that you're working on simultaneously, to me, is really important. It's a way that I can continue to learn and develop my skills. It's a way that I can grow. It's a way that I can test different technologies, and I can take risks and improve my skills.
I remember when we would have people bring that point up, we would say, from a business standpoint, shoot for the client first, but then shoot for yourself.
And I think that's fantastic. It's great advice.
Yes.
Right? And if you can fit that in, and you can fit in, like if your personal projects can meld with your client work,
Right.
that's absolutely fantastic. You know, when I look at some of my projects, like my aerial work, it all started because I was flying for Adobe. I mean, I was just taking pictures out of the airplane window. They were commercial flights. And the reason I was doing it is because I was just trying to make better use of my time.
Yeah, because there you were.
Yeah, between A and B, I've got 5 hours in the plane. What am I going to do, you know? Plus, I'm afraid to fly. So putting the camera between
You are not afraid to fly.
Oh, terrified, because it's a control thing. But it's
okay.
putting the camera between you and like 30,000 feet below
That
kind
makes
of
it
makes
better?
you an observer, not a participant. Yeah, so it totally works for me. So but now when I want to maybe rent a small aircraft or something, that's not really client work for me. So
do you do that?
I do. And
I don't understand.
Doors off. It's terrifying, but it's so
Okay.
like it's what I want to do.
It's like a rush.
I just love seeing the world from that perspective. And kind of there's this, I don't usually photograph like buildings or houses or man-made things. It's more kind of abstract areas.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar.
So I love those patterns that
So
you
is that
just
how you
see.
get like the straight down?
Yeah. Either a helicopter with a door off or a plane with a door off. With
Okay,
a
so those
strap.
aren't just on your commercial flights.
No,
That
more
makes
recently.
a lot more sense.
Yeah, more recently.
I didn't know that you were doing that, but I knew you were getting these shots, and I couldn't figure it out. I thought, is she just
sometimes
using the perspective tool?
No. Sometimes you just have to
doing?
say it. What do they say? In when I used to play volleyball, and they say, the juice is worth the squeeze. Like you got to do it. You got to get out there and put yourself on the edge.
I guess. No, I respect that. I just can't imagine facing a fear like that. Well, that's just me. Why do personal projects fall off the list? When even if somebody wants, let's say somebody's interested in doing it, and they don't get around to it, they don't quite get there.
So the biggest reason that most people say is just time, But then I always say, well, we all have the same 24-hour day.
Right.
So why are some people able to do it and some people aren't? I mean, some people have more commitments. That's just
some people have 7 children.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I try to set aside time for me. Personal time and creative time is the most important time. And I think there's a lot to be said. If you're not happy with yourself, you're not gonna be happy with your life or your spouse or your children or whatever it is, that you need a little selfish time. And whether that's a personal project or exercise or whatever it is you do, I think it's really important. There's also fear of failure, right?
Yeah.
So my argument to that is just, I'm not arguing the facts, but with failure, like I never think of my personal projects as stressful. I think of them as play, because you can't fail at play. So how are you going to fail at a project? See, if you define it, like my client isn't defining what I photograph, I'm defining it. So if I can define what makes a project successful, I'm totally in control. And I can say, hey, this project isn't to get great images. It's to try a new lens. It's to try a different perspective. It's to try something else. So you can't fail. So there's not that fear of failure. And so therefore there's not that added layer of stress. I also think that sometimes people feel silly. Like I feel silly. Like I did the more recent book, this passenger seat book on personal projects. Again, everyone's going to think I'm lazy. The first one was window seat, where I was sitting in a plane. Now passenger seat, I'm sitting in a car.
In a car, right.
But I'm just taking pictures out the window. But
it does sound really lazy.
I know
it just sounds like you're really not putting a lot of effort into it.
Right? Just sitting there between point A and point B, and I'm just taking pictures out the car window. But I'm panning, and I'm doing this slow blur, and I'm getting this great motion in the images.
You're doing stuff.
But you feel silly, right? Like you're going by and you drive by someone, and you realize that person is like looking in your window while you're taking pictures. You're like, oh, what am I doing? But who cares? Who cares if you feel silly, right? I mean, the people that I respect, they're not going to laugh at me, when I come out with
honestly,
images.
if I cared, if I felt silly if I cared when I felt silly, I'd care a lot about a lot. I'd feel silly a large portion of my life.
And we might be making images that are so far ahead of our time, we don't even realize it.
There could be that.
Right?
Legit. Because when you just a small technical thing, you are manipulating things in Lightroom Mobile. Is that right? Are you doing some adjustments and whatnot?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I adjust my images in post-processing all the time. Whether it's on Lightroom Mobile, Lightroom on the desktop, whether it's, going into Photoshop and using multiple images in the same file.
Okay.
Although the motion blur stuff in the passenger seat book, those photos were captured like that in camera.
Right.
There's very little manipulation. Like I didn't add the blur after the fact. That's way too hard.
Right.
It's so much easier to get it in camera.
And what do you shoot with a lot?
For that project, I was shooting with DSLR, or I guess we can just call them SLRs now, can't we?
Yeah, I suppose.
An SLR with just probably... You're going to ask me all this equipment stuff, and people are going to see how non-technical I am. I think it's like a 35 to 70, or maybe it's a 28 to 70, or maybe it's 28 to 105, or something
all those
like
sound
that.
really good to me.
It's a lovely lens, really fast as far as focus goes, which you have to do when you're in a car,
right?
Moving fast, or a bus.
Those will all work.
Yes. So, yeah.
How do you pick one? How do you choose a project?
How do I choose a project? So if some people just know, right? They just know their personal project. That's what they want to do, and they just go out and do it. But a lot of times when I teach a course and I ask people, do you have a personal project? What are you working on just for you that will bring you satisfaction and bring you joy? They say, I don't know. And so then you just have to say, well, okay, if you don't know, I know you don't know, but if you did know, what would it be? And then they'll tell you, right? It's just this fear of like, oh, I don't want to say it, but I have this idea, but it sounds silly and I haven't thought it through. So you just say, no, I know you don't know. But if you did, like just throw something out there. And they're like, oh, well, I'll throw something out there. I just don't want to commit to it. So as soon as they throw something out there, everyone has lots of projects. So I never have just one project at a time, right? Okay. Because I like small projects, medium-term projects, and then longer-term projects. And I like multiple projects so you can switch back and forth between them.
Okay.
Because you don't always have time. Like some people pick a project, like they have to be in a certain location. Like maybe I want to shoot Northern Lights. Okay. So you have to travel somewhere to go shoot those lights. You have to be lucky. You have to be fortunate enough to have the weather cooperate and everything. Right. So that in and of itself kind of narrows like when you can do this. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times I try to pick a project where I can do it anytime. And that's the thing that's so funny is everybody has their own life and they think in their life like, oh, I don't have access to anything interesting. Are you kidding? Like everyone does. They just don't think they do because it's their normal.
Right.
So you talk to someone and like, oh yeah, I don't have access to anything interesting. So I see you have this picture of this horse. Oh yeah, I've been racing horses since and you're just like, what?
There it is.
Like, there it is. There's your access.
Yeah.
What do I do? Oh, well, I'm in convention centers a lot, and I'm in hotel rooms and taxis, and I'm in the plane for 5 hours. So it really is just making use of the time that you have.
Right. And I feel like it's also opening your eyes and trying to see things without looking through your eyes, or like what you say, your normal maybe.
I would totally agree.
Because there you are, with the horse racing person. And if they would try to look at that with new eyes, they might see something completely different.
Absolutely. Once they start photographing it, it's like me in the plane again, right? Where all of a sudden I become this, spectator. I'm watching it unfold instead of being this participant. I'm sure that would happen with them as well.
Well, and it helps you with your fear of flying too.
Yeah, thank goodness.
I think it's interesting that you started by saying, when somebody says, I don't know, just say, well, if you did know, what would it be? Is that what you said?
Yeah, they say, well, I don't know. And I say, well, I know you don't know, but if you did know, what would it be? And everyone will answer the second time. So if you ever want to draw something like, what are you looking for today? I don't know. Well, I know you don't know, but if you did know, what would you be looking for? And they will say it every time. They'll be like, well, I'm actually looking for this lens. And you're like, ha, see?
I have never heard of that tactic. I call it a tactic.
Okay.
Knowing what you studied in college for a while, I feel like that says a lot about you. That's like a psychological thing. Well, but if you did know.
What would it be?
Because you know that they know.
Because I'm letting you off the hook. You don't have to commit to it.
So that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very psychological. Well, we talked about everyone living such busy lives, and some people have, 14 kids, and I get that. But how do you integrate this? How do you integrate this into such a busy life? Like, what are intentional things that you can do? Okay,
so that's great. So the first thing I would suggest is that people limit the scope, right? Like, if you have, I said I personally have a lot of projects going on at one time, but that can be overwhelming for some people. So to limit the scope of each project, now, of course, everything I say, you take it with a grain of salt, because you want the projects to evolve. If they need to go, it's like a river. You start it in one direction, but if it needs to kind of turn left or turn right, go with it. But I definitely try to limit the scope of my projects. And by that, I mean, I try to define what the ending result is that I'm trying to accomplish. So if it's just, I'm going out today and photographing, I don't know, things that are rectangular or a circle, or I just want to get out and get motivated to go shoot something, then that's going to look very different from, I want to get 25 exhibition prints that are hanging on the wall, or I want to do a book project, or I want to make a slideshow of it or something like that. But I think if you actually figure out what you want as a result, and then you start working backwards, it helps you to figure out what you actually need to do.
Well, and sometimes we just need to crawl before we walk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And it seems like, to don't bite off more than you can chew, and keep it realistic, and give yourself something that you think is realistically attainable.
And since it's right after the new year, everybody's set their goals for the new year. And that just kind of kills me sometimes, because people set these goals that aren't, it's not that they're not realistic, but they're not specific enough. Like, I try to break it up so I definitely have milestones that I can reach. So I take these big goals and I just keep chunking them apart. So they're smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you can get out of bed and just get one done like that. Because the more you can get, I mean, there's tons of studies that say if you can make a small win, it's going to lead to bigger wins, because you're like, yes, I did it. I did that one thing.
Right.
And now I can do something else.
Right.
And it also helps people, because these longer term projects, sometimes you got to step off the treadmill and then get back on it a month later. And so to have all these goals and to be able to kind of write down and journal where you are as you're stepping off, it's going to help you kind of step back on without that big jolt.
Oh, the treadmill analogy. That hits, honestly, it hits home for me, because for me, it's exercise, right? And eating, that's my thing. And just to get on a treadmill for 5 minutes is a big deal.
It is, but
it doesn't do anything for me, really. I mean, like, physically, it's not like I'm, losing 700 calories in 5 minutes. But, mentally, to get on there for 5 minutes can lead to another 5 minutes, and then and then all of a sudden I'll be like, I can do this for a lot more than 5 minutes.
But
Right.
it's starting it, right?
Right.
It's that initial,
Right.
I have to do this. Remember last year, Mel Robbins came and spoke
Yeah.
at PPFA
Yeah.
on the first day, and her whole thing is like counting back. I think she goes from 5, but 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then she just does whatever it is she has to do. And that is great.
Yeah.
I was talking about it with a friend of mine, and I was like, yeah, and then she counts back, and she goes 3, 2, 1, and she goes, no, she goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm like, yeah, I don't have time for that. I just need the 3, 2, 1. I gotta go. So, but it's so true, and that's with all the psychology that I've taken and everything too. It's just, at some point, we all like to procrastinate, but you just have to get started. You just have to do the work.
Yeah.
And whatever you can do to trick yourself into getting started, because once you get started, it's always amazing how much easier it is to continue. And at the end, one of the things that people told me that was actually missing in my book, and I totally see it now, is when you reach that milestone, when you get off that treadmill, you have to take a moment and go, yeah, I just did that. I just did that, and celebrate it and be like, yeah, that is what I did. So I just made that photograph. Even if you weren't successful with the photograph, you're like, yeah, instead of sitting home in my nice warm little room while it's snowing out, I actually got up and I stopped consuming content. So I stopped watching TV, or I stopped watching my computer, and I went out and I created content.
Yeah.
And that's what we need, more content creators. Like,
You stopped consuming and
stopped
you started
consuming.
creating.
yeah.
Ooh, I like that.
I want this year, that is one of my things is, one of my goals is to consume less and create more. And then that's a great, very broad statement, but how do you measure that? So just like goal setting with personal projects, it's like, all right, well, what does that look like to me?
Right.
Oh, I don't know. Well, if you did know, what would it look like? Okay, that would look like me making X number of images,
Right.
or publishing a book,
Right.
and then working backwards until I figure out what I have to do on a daily basis to achieve that goal over the time span.
So so let's say I'm interested in this. I'm like, I'm going to do this, and I get started, and it starts to taper, or it starts to, maybe I get distracted, or how do I push through? How do I persevere?
Well, I think you can take a break at any time. Like I'm not against if you need to take a break, you have other things going on in your life, take a break, but don't stop. Don't stop the project. Like, don't quit the project. You can pause the project.
Okay.
All right. And
The
then
pause
you can
button, not the stop button.
The pause button, not the stop button.
Okay, I like it.
Unless it's something that's just, you're like, you know what, I've lost the plot on this. I've totally derailed. The train is off the tracks, and I don't know what I was thinking, which sometimes happens, right? Like,
But that's part of the creative process.
Isn't
it not?
It is, because people always ask me like, oh, that composite's so interesting. How long did it take you to do it? And I give them like my age, because I'm like, it took everything from when I was born to this day to make that composite.
Yes.
But the perseverance thing, it's just, sometimes you just have to do it. You just have to do it. You just have to start, like you said. You just have to get on that treadmill for 5 minutes. And for me, with the personal project, there's not the pressure, because there is no risk, because I've defined what the success of the project is. So it's all for me. And I know that it's going to feel better when I move it forward. I'm going to feel proud of it. I'm going to feel like I did something. I did something meaningful. I mean, everyone out there, your life is worth it. Do something noble. Spend the time and do what you really want to do, because that's what you're going to do best.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And I think people miss that sometimes. What do you collaborate very much?
I do. I try to
bring people in.
Okay, but you have to be a little careful on collaboration.
Okay.
All right. So, collaboration for me is not, this is going to sound terrible, but it's not about emojis or hearts or likes. Okay. So if I am going to, and this, I just think this is advice that I got from someone, and I thought it was really, really good advice. And that is, know whose opinion means something to you.
Oh my.
Okay.
Amen. I want you to preach it.
Because every day, like I got sucked into Instagram, right? And the likes, and it gives you a little dopamine, like, oh yeah, I got a like,
But did that happen to you, really?
Yes, it did. And you know what I didn't know. Do you know that people, like, they post stuff and then if it doesn't get enough likes, they delete it.
I know somebody very close to me that does that, and I just found that out a few months ago, and I was horrified.
So this is a thing that's like really rattling around in my brain right now, because when I started Instagram, it was post a picture a day, and I like to do triptychs because I don't like to just stop at the first picture.
You did,
I like to explore
did triptychs all the time.
Yeah, I used to always do it, and then they kind of messed up the way the feed went.
Right.
So then it was just a random thing, so it looked weird. So anyway, I'm not doing it anymore. Plus, sometimes you can't do the same thing over and over.
Yeah,
right?
you gotta shift.
You gotta shift it up a little bit, pivot, and so with the Instagram thing. You start thinking about, well, gosh, I want more likes. And then it just happened over Christmas. I have to tell you, I'm like, all right, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try these shots that I've taken with my tilt shift lens. This is another personal project. Love my tilt shift lens. Love knocking things out of focus. And they had people in them. And I was just like, okay, people who follow you they're following you for landscape, not for portraits. So this is a risk, but you're going to put it up there. And I didn't crop them square. And I'm like, yep, this is a risk, throwing it up there. Crickets. Total crickets. Like,
no.
Oh yeah, it was nothing. And so then I was like, oh, huh. So then I went outside and there's this beautiful snowy scene, and I took this picture and I was like, the most likes I'd ever gotten. Yes. Okay. So then I was like, okay, wait a minute. Now I'm letting social media totally control what I'm posting.
Yeah.
And for me, because it's not a brand. Now, some would argue, well, yes, it is a brand because I work for Adobe and that's one big brand.
Sure.
But I kind of have to make a decision at this point. Do I go with the brand?
Yeah.
Or do I split this into two? No, I don't want two social media Instagram feeds. So what if I just put up the work I want to put up and it doesn't get any likes? Well, I started looking at, who follows me, and there's some fantastic photographers that follow me.
Right.
So please, don't take this the wrong way. But if you've got a bunch of, if you're usually taking landscapes and all of a sudden you do portraits, well, those aren't your followers, so they probably won't like them. Right? But I want to post what kind of makes me happy and what brings me joy.
Post, right.
Yeah. And if no one else likes it, I don't know who those other people are necessarily. So I'm not sure how much I should let them affect what it is I post.
Maybe not much. And that's your point. Like, decide who it is that should have that power to a degree.
Yeah, because you don't want to give your power over to just anybody.
No, certainly not the interwebs. Just random people there.
Yeah.
What about accountability though? Like,
so I have some close friends. So I have some close friends. And when I said, it's not all about the likes, and what started that kind of rantish thing on me it was more just about, I want constructive criticism.
Okay.
So it's not that I want likes, and it's not that I want people to say, hey, if you changed the tonality here, if you had dodged this side, if you got rid of this distracting element, something like that, right. I'm going to learn so much more from that.
Well, and you don't even need to agree with it.
No, you don't. It's just
sometimes you won't.
Nope. But hearing other people's opinion, as long as it's constructive and not just like, this isn't the most interesting picture I've seen. I'm like, well, that's not the most constructive criticism I've ever gotten. So there you go.
We're even. It's a wash.
There, you wasted 2 minutes of your life and I wasted 2 minutes of mine.
But it is nice to have some feedback from somebody that you feel was well thought out.
Absolutely. And I constantly seek that from people. Yeah. You're never too old and you're never too good to get feedback.
Right. Again, even if you think they are completely incorrect.
Yeah. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to change your work, but it's good. Sometimes you're so close to your work that it's really hard to step back. Like, a lot of times photographers get so involved in the process of photographing and the emotion and everything they felt while they were taking the image. That has nothing to do with the actual final resulting photograph. Mm-hmm. The other thing I find super helpful is to write about my photography, because if you ask most photographers to talk about their photography, it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
But I think that we kind of make work at the level of our language. And so it's really helpful to be able to have the words to describe what it is you were trying to do. Now, some people would say, well, you shouldn't have to do that. If you have to explain your photograph, it's, it didn't work. But I don't think that's necessarily true.
Right.
I remember going to a museum once and, I walked through the exhibition and I saw it and it was great and I enjoyed it. But then I went back just because a friend wanted to go back, and we listened to the headset and we listened to the curator talk about why they chose those images to go together. It was a completely different experience.
Right.
And I felt I got a lot more from that experience. Now, that's not exactly the same as talking about, one artist talking about their work, because it's a curator giving their opinion about a broad number of work and how they tie together. But at the same time, it's just not everyone is going to see maybe what you intended for them to see, because they're all going to bring their own personal experiences to the work,
piece, sure.
right? So if you can help them, see something in your work or help them realize the message that you're trying to communicate, I always think that's a good thing. And plus, it just clarifies. If you have to write about your own work, you start getting real clear on what you're talking about.
Yeah, and what about just doing it for you too?
Yeah. Or what about incorporating, text into your photographs? Or what about, I have journals and journals of just snippets of other people's words, because I love to read, that just create some kind of visual image that I want to make.
Right.
Eventually.
Right. Well, you have that dreams, your dreams, what I dream.
Yeah.
On your website.
Yeah.
That's trippy, man.
Well, thank you. I take that as a compliment. Trippy is good.
It is a compliment. I mean that in the best possible way.
Yeah, I've always had very, very vivid dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gets awkward sometimes. When I've actually, many times, I would say once a month, I actually wake up and I think the doorbell, and I actually get out of bed and I'm walking towards the door and I'm like, oh, I know that wasn't the doorbell, because my doorbell, A, doesn't work. B, when it does work, it just goes ding. It doesn't go ding dong. And so that obviously had to be a dream.
But you hear that.
Yeah. So I wrote, ever since college, I've written down dreams, and they're just this constant source of inspiration for me. So it's great. I love it.
I can't think of a better one. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So to plug something, we can talk about your book, the new one.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Passenger Seat.
I do. It's a combination book. I think it's kind of in thirds. So there's a third about this whole idea of a personal project and how to choose one and move it forward and all those things. Then there's a third of the book, which are just images that kind of show, it's kind of like bringing the project to fruition. It says, hey, I actually practice what I preach. This isn't just a bunch of words.
Right.
And then the ending part is the Lightroom workflow. So it takes you from downloading your images, how I organize them, how I take them to the develop module, how I process them, how I take them into Photoshop when I need to, why I would do that.
So there's a really fantastic educational component.
Yes, absolutely. It's not just pretty pictures.
Yeah, that people can integrate, actually.
Yeah.
I like to do a call to action for people, and I feel like your topic really fits this, to give somebody a challenge, or to say, go do this in the next week or the next month, especially, as we leave convention. Here we are at this convention, and, everyone goes back home and they're overwhelmed or they're freaked out. But I like your philosophy in that it doesn't have to be, the Sistine Chapel type scale.
Right. Yeah. So, gosh, there's as many personal projects as there are photographers. So it's hard for me to give kind of one overall, because I don't know where people are in their life.
Well, just pick one. I mean, you can tell someone just to pick something, just to do something.
I would say part of me is torn. Part of me is saying, well, just pick a project. Just define your project.
Good.
That's your first step. Define it.
Good.
But I also, people will be like, but define it, but that doesn't get me a result. Right? It doesn't give me the end result. So maybe I would be better off telling or encouraging someone to go out and make 3 images with a specific lens without moving from a single location. So you pick a place, you stand there, and you have to take 3 images from that location.
Oh, that's fun.
Or you can pick one scene or one object, take that object, maybe an object, and take it to 3 different locations and photograph it. I mean, there's tons of things that you can do just on a really small scale to get out there and kind of get that creativity going, to kind of spark it into something else.
I love it.
Or I could tell them to go buy the book, and then they could follow along.
Go get the book. Go get both of them. If you don't have them, get them. Come on.
And then one other, I will just, if I could wrap up with one thing, it would be master your techniques.
Okay.
So that you can do the creative aspect of it.
I like that. So you don't have to think about it so much and worry about that piece so much.
You don't have to worry about your f-stop, and
that's great
you don't
advice.
have to worry about picking the tool in Photoshop.
I love to hear professional photographers tell other people to learn your camera.
Oh yeah.
Learn it.
Yeah.
Know it.
So there's a great quote that's amateurs practice until they get it right. professionals practice till they can't get it wrong.
I love it.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know who said it, but it's so true. Like I don't want to have to think about what I'm doing in Photoshop when I'm creating my content.
Yep. I like it when my left hand's on that keyboard and I don't even realize that it's doing what it's doing.
Yep.
And like 5 minutes later, I'm like, I have no idea what just happened. That's when I'm in the zone.
That becomes the big black hole that we know as Photoshop.
Oh yeah, we'll stay away. You know what? I really appreciate your time. This was great.
Oh, thank you. This was fabulous. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for doing this. I hope you sell 100 million copies of your books. That would be
I hope
sweet.
that we get 100 million photographers doing a personal project.
Even better. Thanks a lot. And you know what? I think it's fitting to say to anyone right now, if you're saying, I don't know, what if you did know? What would it look like? Thanks, Julieanne.